I saw
Good
all the
morning,
notes
everybody.
on the show about the run of show where it said, Katie, start recording. Katie, really start recording. Katie, last chance, start recording now. So we are recording.
Katie, start the recording or you're fired. Yeah, no, it's a real thing. I've not had a big, knock on wood, I've not had a big beef up, but I've definitely had we're halfway through the bio and I have not yet started the recording.
It's so easy to forget. Welcome everybody. We're gonna give just a minute or two more for folks to trickle in. Yeah, I think we had about 40 or so signups for this. So a lot of people catch the recording later, but I expect a few more people to hop in live. Hi Kent. How are you, baby?
I'm doing all right.
Do I get to see your face?
Yeah, here I'm somewhere in there.
Where are you?
I'm in Bishop. I just got into Bishop.
Is it
doing
Mule
my
Days?
No.
Oh, it's there.
I'm kind of living over here part-time and working over here. I'm doing work with NRCS and rancher to rancher, and we've actually got an equine packer to packer event coming up in October. So it'll be the first time we've looked at mules and horses with regards to rancher to rancher. So we're calling it packer to packer because it's a bunch of pack stock on some land here in the Owens Valley. It'll be in October when they're on winter ground. So yeah, kind of exciting. Yeah.
Send us the info for that. We'll put it in the follow-up email when we send the recording out for this.
Yeah. And I've got several people who want to do the recording and stuff because they have horses and things. And yeah, no, I've been following this stuff. The Australians have been pretty up to date on grazing and grasslands and horses.
I'm so glad you could join us, Ken. It's so nice to meet you.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if you guys can see me or not. I see you.
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay.
Just a little guy because we have our slide pinned, but you look great.
I'm everybody's grizzled old sidekick these days. Everybody needs one kind of thing.
Are you wearing a peaked hat though?
They're what?
What? Show me your hat. You don't have a flat top on?
Yeah, I have them. Yeah, no, this is
freaking me out, man.
Yeah, I know.
I'm seeing in a hat like that.
This belonged to a family friend. This is an ancient hat, belonged to a old classic California vaquero, Ray Ordway, and he and I wore the same size hats, and I inherited this, sweat stains and all. So
yeah.
I occasionally wear it just for, just because I like it.
Love it.
So anyway, yeah. And I'm packing too. That's the other thing too, is I'm packing this summer. In fact, I'm living at a pack station up about 9,000 feet just to the west of Bishop. So in fact, it's the first place I ever packed, where I learned to pack. So full circle.
Ken, is that near Aspendell where you're going to be?
Yeah, near there. You bet. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. My cousin lives there. That's awesome. I've really been wanting to get down there.
Yeah. Where the pack station is just up above Aspendale at what they call North Lake, and it was founded by the Schober family back in the 1930s. So, and I was lucky enough to work with Art Schober, who founded it. He was in his 80s when I was working there.
Cool. Man, we're gonna have to, that's so cool. It's it's such a pleasure to meet you. Yeah, Beth saw you were logging on. I was like, oh, you have to meet Ken. So I'm super glad to meet you. And it'd be super fun to connect more offline, but maybe we should jump in and let folks trickle in, Beth.
Let's dive in and get started here. I'm sure we're gonna have some more people trickle in as we get going, but I'm Beth Robinette. I am joined by my wonderful colleague, Katie Roberts. Together, we make up the learning and practice team of AVI, which is the savory hub that services the West Coast and the Intermountain West. And we teach Avi's online classes. And also as part of that, we put on this free webinar series where we just talk about topics we think are cool. And we usually kind of swap back and forth between a more technical, hard skills topic and then a bit more of like a soft skills, interpersonal kind of thing. So this month we are both honoring our inner horse girls and we're talking about equine grazing. And we're joined by two really awesome panelists who I'm excited to introduce you to in a moment. But first, I just want to talk about our upcoming offerings. If you want to click the slide, Katie. We have some great virtual courses coming up. We have a class on holistic policy design that's going to be really interesting coming up in September. This is going to be taught by Andrea Malmberg, and it's specifically about applying the holistic management framework to policy creation, which is one of the applications of holistic management that doesn't get talked about as much, but it's really, really important. So there's going to be a ton of great content and discussion there. We have our Foundations of Holistic Management class coming up in October. Katie and I are teaching that. That'll be working through creating a holistic context, stating what are your values, what's the future you're working towards, and then teaching a decision-making process to help you actually make management decisions that get you there. And you'll also learn just some of the basic fundamentals of this approach to grazing and land management. We have our holistic financial planning class coming up, which I am really excited about. It is probably the least sexy of the planning processes, but absolutely the most vital. And this is a very approachable, not scary take on budgeting and financial planning so that you can actually figure out how to make money doing this stuff. And if you're a person that is freaked out by math or does not like spreadsheets, this is the class for you. We're going to hold your hand every step of the way through. It's very confidence boosting. And if you want to talk to somebody who's taken the class before, we're happy to hook you up for a little testimonial. We also have our replay package that's available online. So if you can't join our live classes, you can also get a pass to access the previous recorded classes and do it at your own pace. And then we have an in-person offering coming up at the Lazy R Ranch, which is my home base in Eastern Washington. That's going to be intro to holistic management, holistic financial planning, and holistic land planning, which is figuring out how to design the infrastructure for your land base. And in conjunction with financial planning, figure out how to actually make the money to put that infrastructure in place. You get to hang out with me. You get to see my adorable fat little cows. And you get to, again, have a very affirming, spreadsheet positive, math de-traumatizing experience, which will serve you your whole life long. Okay, enough of schlocking stuff. Nope.
Schlock. One more schlock.
One more thing to sell you. No, this one's free. We have our next webinar in this series. We're going to be swapping to more of a soft skills thing. We're putting together a webinar to talk about conflict resolution through a holistic management lens. And Katie and I have been working with a really masterful conflict facilitator over the last year with some of the clients that Avi works with and also internally within Avi. And we're going to be sharing some of the insights that we've gained about just how to make human beings work together better and move through conflict in a way that is actually healthy and productive. So that's sure to be a very rich conversation. Okay, now, oh, hi, Rasheen. So many cool people on the webinar today. Yay. Okay. I want to introduce our panelists. They are both so interesting, and I'm so excited to talk to them more. So we're joined today by Meg Greski. So after graduating from West Virginia University, Meg Greski started her career in regenerative agriculture as Greg Judy's mob grazing intern in Missouri. No big deal, super big deal. She operated Rhinestone Cattle Co. in the Northeast US before moving to Oklahoma in 2019. In studying American agriculture, Meg has been to 43 states and worked as an artificial insemination tech, a veterinary assistant, farm and ranch hand, and intern for Understanding Ag. She's a two-time guest on Clay Connery's Working Cows podcast. Highly recommend the episodes. They're great listens. She's also presented at National Grazing Lands Coalition's conferences. Articles have been published in Stockman Grass Farmer, Acres USA, and onpasture.com. Meg raises cattle, goats, and horses in western Oklahoma as the owner of 1115 Livestock. She works as a regenerative educator for the Oklahoma Conservation Commission and partners with her best friend in Those Guys Rodeo Company out of Canyon, Texas. She's a ranch bronc rider, classic car enthusiast, and mom to an Italian greyhound named Roxanne. Super stoked to have you here. Thank you so much, Meg. Gavin, equally cool. Gavin is a holistic grazier who operates a family-owned and operated farm enterprise on 6,500 acres in northwest of New South Wales, Australia. He's a second-generation holistic manager. And for 25 years, he's been on a restorative path to grow healthy systems from the soil to stock, seeing considerable reasons for implementing regenerative practices without compromising on business goals. His company, Serum Australis, uses cell-grazing and holistic methods to run 240 horses in one herd, 200 sheep, and fluctuating numbers of cattle to provide blood products for the biomedical industry, exporting worldwide. It's no lie to say that he's continuously hungry to learn how to work with nature for optimum results that benefit the land and the people it sustains. When Katie and I originally had the concept for this webinar, like we've all heard so many negative stereotypes about grazing horses. As someone who owns and has horses on pasture, I've definitely experienced firsthand some of the challenges that are unique to horses. And I think you can drive around most any horse pasture anywhere in the world and see some pretty degraded land. So I'm just really excited to talk to you both more about your experience. And I'm hoping you can start off by first just telling us a little about each of your business models because they're really unique. And Meg, I'm going to start with you, and then you can follow it up, Gavin.
So,
Well, I don't want to say I'm a mercenary, but I will graze whatever I can graze to make money. So I have cattle right now. I've done cow-calf and yearlings. I have goats this year. Got into goats for the first time. I've done some work in the past with working with sheep and goats, but this is my first time actually owning them. And horses have been a big part of helping me build my business. And I found myself with a lot more dogs than I ever expected. But right now, I am entirely a custom grazing business. I don't own any of my own livestock, and that's because I'm still relatively a startup. Custom grazing is a great way for a new producer who's not stepping into an established, like either a family business or a partner's business, somebody who's starting something from the ground up. Custom grazing is a great way to get operating and get some cash flow going without having to get a massive operating loan. And that's something I learned from Greg Judy. Because Greg went from behind to very far ahead, and he did it largely with custom grazing. So I do plan to start owning some livestock in the future, but right now we are totally custom. And I consider myself a service provider. So not only am I trying to create livestock production, trying to reach reproductive goals, reach weight gain goals, but I'm also trying to provide the service to my herd owners of having livestock that are easy to handle and that are used to being around people. That's, I think, a big added value that I can bring.
Mm-hmm. Gavin, you want to tell us a little bit about your business?
Yeah, so we started off trying to sell goat serum to the medical research industry, well, not industry, like universities and things like that. And gradually over a period of sort of 7 to 10 years, people found us and asked us what else we could do. And we sort of fell into doing the thing that was in most demand, which was horse blood. And so we sell horse blood to companies making blood agar plates for hospital diagnostics. We have a large part of the Australian market doing that. And then along the way, we also picked up sheep, and we have a few cows that we sell blood to as well, we do it all holistically, and I'd already trained in ranching for profit with my dad when I came back to the farm 25 years ago now. And we are trying to run them so that they regenerate our old farmland. We have old farmland that's been, it's really tired. It's been ploughed and overgrazed for decades and decades before we started. So we're using those animals to bring the soil health back, and it is working. It's a long, slow process, but yeah, we're locked into the animals that our customers are asking for. We've been asked for alpacas before, but we're sticking to what we know and trying to keep it simple, which is not always easy when you have such a big lot of horses. But we're continually learning how not to get things broken and how to graze them better so that we fit into the amount of rain we have and the types of pasture we have too. But yeah, it's a really interesting job, and I don't find many places I can get help. Is one of the things we have to learn it ourselves. And yeah, hopefully there are people out there on the Zoom tonight that got answers for me as well. So it's good to be here.
Can you just explain, because I had no idea that this was even a thing before we ended up talking on the phone. Like, how does the horse blood business work? How do you collect it? Because it's like a pretty humane process, right? It's kind of like blood donation for a person.
Yes, we do get we get inquiries sometimes about how we collect the blood, and people think we kill the horses, but we actually have a big 10-litre bag with a massive 8-gauge needle, and every 3 weeks the horses come through and we draft out the ones we need, and we can collect. We would collect on average 5 litres from a horse every 3 weeks. And it just goes into a big bag, which we can then process and keep the blood. We can clot the blood without it becoming a big pile of jelly, and then we can pour it and sell it in lots of different amounts. And it just goes out in bottles and bags out to customers to make their things. So yeah, every 3 weeks the horses get bled, and they're standing there in a crush, and they're eating hay and pellets, and we stick our needle in their jugular vein, and it only takes about 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, and all they really want to do is eat mostly. So
super interesting. And Meg, can you tell me a little more about like the horse part of what you're doing too?
Yes, absolutely. So I never actually set out to be a horse grazer, but what I did is when I got my rented property in Oklahoma, I started up down here again ranching for myself in 2023. So I had my piece of land, and then I had to figure out, what do I put on it? I'm definitely going to custom graze to start out with, and then reinvest the earnings and work my way up to owning livestock. So I'm like, okay, well, now I need to figure out, I got to find some cattle to put on this place. Figured it was going to be cattle, but I asked around on social media, put out some little ads saying, hey, I've got grass, who has animals they want to find a place for. And I asked actually for bids. So I'm thinking, well, if I just price myself at, say, like $1.25 per head per day, but there's actually somebody out there that's willing to pay more than that, I don't want to let that go. So I asked for bids, and I kind of did like a competitive bidding process. And the top bid that came in was from a rodeo stock contractor, and he offered to pay $2.50 per horse per day. And I said, what? Because the going rate for cattle around that time was about $1.20, $1.50. So this was going to be some significant money. I says, you know what? I think I'm going to go with horses. And so that was how I got my first custom grazing deal with horses. And then as the winter went on, those horses were leaving so much grass behind them, I ended up being able to run cattle behind them too. So I kind of doubled up on the money.
Wow. Okay, can you speak to some of the unique challenges of managing horses, Meg? Because I'm assuming it's not like turning some custom grazing cows out.
I do largely manage the horses as livestock because the horses I've been running are rodeo bucking stock, which while they're not feral idiots, they are definitely less handled than your average horse, you know, the trail horse, roping horse, whatever. So I do manage them as livestock, and they largely work the same way, but a couple of big differences that I have figured out is, first of all, fencing and visibility is really important. A lot of stuff that will keep cattle in, like a single hot wire, may not keep horses in. I did run them on a single hot wire, and I continue to do that, but it has to be a highly visible one. So I use white poly braid, and you can get horse braid products that are thicker. So I think mine's like a 3/8 or maybe smaller than that. It's a real thin poly braid, just the standard stuff that Ken Cove or Powerflex has, but you can get horse braid that's thicker. It's upwards of like a 1/4 inch thick. So that's really easy for them to see. So if horses don't see it, they will go through it, and they'll go through it fast.
Yeah, how about fencing for you, Gavin?
Yeah, well, so when I put my first lot of horses together, they were all in ones, and they were just about all from different places. So there were 60 horses I started with in a couple of different mobs, so a couple of mobs of 60, and they were all from different places from all over the state. They all had probably just been brought up in a stable or a small paddock. Maybe they'd never seen wire before, and they just had wooden fences. So my first things and they'd never been herded in a herd, so they didn't know about being a leader or a middle of the pack or a tail end. So all of those things, every morning when I woke up and had to, if I had to go and muster the horses, I would wake up in a hot sweat because I didn't know what was going to happen, because half the horses would end up in one direction and half would end up in the other, and they weren't a cohesive unit. So that's one really big challenge, that eventually they learned how to be herded and to go where they were being pushed. And they also find friends and create social groups in that new environment. And as I get new horses, they have to learn this as they come in. Fencing, I would agree, Meg. I eventually painted all my wires white because I also use single strand electric. I actually use a hard wire, and and it's only 2.5 mils thick. So I don't know what that is in inches. I think that's like 1/10 of an inch. It's not very thick. I painted them all white, but now I've just recently gone to buy.
Yeah, I had experiences with the social structure as well. I definitely don't do what I would consider high density grazing with the horses, because I was really scared about like making them stand shoulder to shoulder. I mean, they're going to be biting, kicking, chasing each other around. I always wanted to give them more space. And so while I did rotate every day, I did not keep them real tight. So I figured they need more room to run around and to get away from each other if they don't get along. Same goes for when you put out supplement. I wouldn't just put supplement in small piles. I would have to spread it out in either a long line or unroll a bale so that everybody had an opportunity to eat without getting bullied by their neighbor.
Yeah. They're very vicious, obviously, to each other. I ended up putting my supplement in the trough because everyone has to have a drink, and so they would get their minerals in the trough water. because if I put out tubs, I could put them at each end of the paddock so the shy ones would get some, but you didn't always, you knew that some weren't getting it, but everyone has to drink. So that's how I solved that issue. I get issues with them eating bark on mature trees. Obviously, they've got two sets of teeth, top and bottom, so they can bite a bit harder. So then you have to manage it's all about managing timing. So try and shorten the time they're in there, give them a long recovery time. But they're also a very fearful animal, and you don't know what things have scared them in the past and what they're bringing to your situation. So some horses, you just don't know what the heck is going through their head. But I think often they get pushed through the fence because someone darts out to bite them because they came too close to their social group, and suddenly they're through my fence, and they actually break it coming back in to get back to their friend. So there's lots of weird stuff goes on, and I'm never there to see what happens. And I think Meg said on her Working with Cows podcast that she's never there to see what maybe the coyotes have pushed them through a fence. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the only thing I can think it was, is I had a really big problem the second year I had a group of horses, the group that was actually mine. For the first few weeks, they were fine. They trained to the hot wire. They didn't go anywhere near it, didn't have any problems. But then I moved them to a different parcel on my property, and there must have been a coyote den nearby there. There's a big draw where maybe there was more coyote activity, but I started coming out, and every day, like I would leave them at about dinner time, early sunset. The wires were up tight, all the animals were happy, everything was fine, chargers were running. Come back in the morning and everything was tore up and the horses were running all over the place. So it was something that happened every night for a while. And it was frustrating. They broke a lot of my temporary fencing equipment, but I ended up just dealing with it by giving them bigger pastures, and I ran 2 offset wires next to each other about a foot apart. And I think they just had to get used to the coyote presence or whatever it was that was running through there. And they eventually did start staying in. But that was a really interesting deal because it was opposite from what had happened to me the first year. The first 2 weeks were like that when those horses were trying to train to the hot wire. But after that, they were fine.
I want to go back to something you said a minute ago, Gavin, just about like horses' teeth, because they have 2 sets of teeth, and like obviously they have a hard single hoof versus a more like soft cloven foot, like a cow or a sheep. Have either of you noticed just that like some of the physiological traits of horses, like are there unique factors to management because of those things?
I think they certainly can create a lot of damage with their hoofs, but I think it's still a time thing. Jim Gerrish talks about just managing the time, and I really think it comes down to that. You're going to get, but they are harder on country than a cow. So I do have a cow herd, and I know that if I leave them in a place for the same amount of time as my horses, they don't do as much. They don't rough the place up anywhere near as much as the horses do. So yes, you definitely can be a lot harder on country. But cattle will eat my young trees that are growing and horses won't. So there are trade-offs. But they might kill a big mature tree that a cow won't touch because it can't. So yeah, there are lots of different things, and but controlling time and maybe density, like Meg says. I don't think you can get horses to graze as densely as cattle. Like you hear Gabe Brown or someone saying about 1 million pounds per acre. I don't think you'd get horses packed that tight. They'd fight all day. They wouldn't actually do any eating.
Yeah, every bite that a horse takes is going to be a severe bite on that plant. So it's important to understand the difference between severe grazing and overgrazing. So, I mean, there's a school of thought in regenerative grazing about ultra high density, non-selective grazing or total grazing, where they are very clear on the fact that just because you bite a plant off short or bite a plant off at the ground does not mean you've actually hurt that plant. So, and I think that horses require a very high level of attention to their defoliation severity and the recovery period of the plants, but they don't necessarily have to be damaging. They just take a lot of intensive management.
Right. And what I'm hearing you both say is it really is just about this time management. It's about how long is the plant exposed to that grazing pressure, and then making sure that you're allowing for an adequate recovery period for the plant. Like, even if it is severely grazed, that it has enough time to actually physiologically recover from that defoliation.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I learned that lesson the hard way over the first 10 years or so.
Yeah.
Coming back too soon is definitely often the hard thing, and we were spiraling down into some very dry years leading up to 2019, and I couldn't. Well, part of my business is that I have to keep my horse numbers. If I'd had cattle, I would have sold all my animals by a certain period, but I had to keep my horses, and in the end decided to full feed them for 11 months in 2019. But you have to be prepared to make that decision, and my business can cope with that because we're selling blood every week. If I'd had cattle, they would have had to go. Nothing grew in that year. Yeah.
Man.
And I had an experience too where I ended up needing to full feed the horses that I took on last year, which were mine and my partners in the rodeo company. They came into the winter on the thin side because we had an issue with feed resources out in the Amarillo area. So I spent the winter really trying to get them caught up and get them to where they weren't thin, they weren't about moderate flesh, but they were actually fat. So I was trying to go from behind to ahead, and I fed a lot. So I don't know how much benefit they really even got out of the grass that I was on, but we sure did create a lot of impact, and they brought a lot of fertilizer value just because of all the feeding I did. So the effects on my land have been great. I mean, yeah, we could have fed those horses in Amarillo or something else or somewhere else, but I'm glad that I got all of those benefits.
And what would you say, like, are some of the are there benefits that are unique to horses? I think you've spoken to a couple of them, but like, we hear a lot about, I think, some of the preconceived disadvantages of horses, but like, what are they really good at from an ecological standpoint?
Well, in a natural situation, you want biodiversity of all types and kinds of species. And in most ecosystems, I mean, they may not have had historically what we would consider a modern equine, but there have always been bunches of different types of grazing animals with different digestive systems, different grazing preferences. So the totality of plants and forage resources in an ecosystem were always getting used. And there were all kinds of different microbes and different fertilizer concoctions coming out the back end. So I think that the horses bring a diversity of microbes as compared to like if you only ever ran cattle. And they're going to use plants differently. They're going to use different plants. And so I just think they're another level of diversity that is only going to be a good thing in the long run. Not to mention, I mean, the biggest benefit to me has been the financial benefits. Because like I said earlier, you can make a ton of money grazing horses, especially because if you can save the person who owns the horses a few dollars, I mean, you can still make more than you might on cattle.
And I've had a PhD student looking at the microbiome of horses, and there seems to be a lot higher fungal content in their gut, which is not something we really think about. You think about bacteria when you're talking ruminants, but I think horses have more fungal content, so they have that effect on the landscape then with the manure they put out as well. They will also eat. They will eat plants that my sheep and cattle won't touch, and they will leave plants that the sheep and cattle think are absolutely amazing. So I guess then there's an opportunity for another animal to come and eat that plant. But
yeah, I mentioned earlier that my first year on the property that I'm on, I inherited a whole lot of old, rank, overgrown forage that had been sitting there for about 3 years. And it's an important context distinction to make that y'all out in the West have short grass, have hard grass, and that stuff is super high nutrient content and really digestible, excellent quality forage. Whereas us in the tall grass prairie kind of areas in the middle of the country, our grass gets really stemmy and really lignified. I mean, there's times of the year and there's growth stages where it's really nutritious, but it gets rank. And so I inherited a lot of really, really rank grass. I ran a low stocking rate of horses, but they still were leaving so much behind. And I thought, this is just going to go to waste if I don't run it through something that can digest that. So I actually brought a herd of cattle behind the horses. And the cattle were able to process a lot more of that old nasty biomass. So the horses definitely do need a higher plane of nutrition than cattle. So if you're thinking about a custom horse grazing enterprise or turning out some of your own, just keep that in mind too.
Yeah, and I know you both integrate, like you have other species integrated in your operations. So are you running, well, I mean, it sounds like Meg, you were running two different herds, like you were following the horses with the cattle, but do you have any experience like integrating horses with other species in a mob?
So I ran them separate up until last winter, but say that I do it again this coming year or the future, I think I will run them together because it was just unreasonable from a labor standpoint to run two different herds. The reason I did that was just because the horses needed a lot of money worth of supplement, and I wasn't necessarily willing to feed cows like
You don't
that.
want to put that through a cow, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not spending that on the cows. But in the future, I definitely will put them together just because it is not going to be worth it from a labor standpoint doing it separately. And I do at this point run a few head of just saddle horses with my cattle, and they've gotten along just fine. So I have pictures from this spring of my yearlings with my goats, with my horses and my guard dogs and everybody all together.
yeah, I've mostly run my horses on their own, mainly because 240 or 50 horses in a group is enough. And so I haven't really mixed them except from right back at the start when I only had about 30 horses and they just used to live with my cattle. And the only thing I noticed was that they used to chase the calves a little bit. But I have a smaller group of horses that I also, to answer Kent's question, I make snake anti-serum as well. I have a mob of 36 and they will probably end up living with my sheep, I think, because managing such a small amount of animals on the land that we have, it means I end up not grazing them as well as I could. So they need to go into a mob that just reduces my mobs to less of them.
Yeah, I have definitely seen some situations where horses were guarding feed and trying to keep cattle off of them and kicking calves and stuff. But I figure that the way I'd get around that would just be making sure there's enough feeding sites and enough feeding space that there wouldn't have to be guarding or competition. I also have not had horses in the same mob as cows with new calves. And so that would be kind of an interesting experiment to do. I don't think I would do that with somebody else's calves. Like I would have to own them.
No.
That would be really tough to explain to a herd owner, especially right now with what the cow market is doing in the US and calves are worth like $3,000.
Yeah.
All right. Well, a lot of us are managing not 250 horses on not 5,000 acres. So, do you have advice for those of us maybe with a little bit smaller band of horses on maybe a little smaller acreage? Like how can we be doing a better job of managing our equine grazing?
I think you've still got to manage the time they're on a piece of land, and then the time that it gets to recover. You can still do the same things, but you'd have to be creative with your electric wire, unless you're going to build, you know, more permanent fences. If you leave them on a block of land and they keep taking a second bite and a third bite, and just really weakening the plants that are the good plants, you're going to get a bad result. So you need to try and give those plants a chance to thrive. So you would have to fence them into smaller paddocks, and then move them between smaller paddocks. And I mean, you need at least 8 or 10 paddocks to rotate them around. I know that's probably difficult when you may only have an acre or two, but I can't see any other way to do it unless you just full feed them in a yard. I don't know about you, Meg, but I've never had to do that myself. But if I was going to, I think I would try and have a lot of small little paddocks and rotate them through it.
Mm-hmm. I'm definitely not as big as you. I've got about 400 acres right now, and the biggest group of horses that I've managed has been about 30 head. But say that someone only has maybe 5 or 10 acres and a couple horses. I definitely agree that there needs to be rotation and that those plants need to be given rest time. Now, depending on what your forage yield per acre is, I mean, you may not have enough grass to even support any horses, in which situation you're going to need a sacrifice area or a dry lot or a pen that you can put them in, so that when your grazing is happening faster than your pastures are recovering, you can pull them off, put them in the dry lot, feed them hay, and protect those pastures until they recover. You don't just want to start feeding hay on the pasture, because you know how horses graze. They'll grub that pasture down to nothing before they'll even touch the hay. So I think you need to have a sacrifice area. And I'm not sure how feasible it would be, especially with water issues in the Western US. But if you have any ability to irrigate a small acreage, you may be able to grow some extra forage that way, especially if you plant some annual forages or some introduced forages, like put in some clovers or some high yielding introduced grasses. You may be able to grow kind of an artificial amount of high quality forage on a small acreage that way.
Yeah, right. Because when you're adding water, you're basically shortening the recovery periods that you need if you're in a place that has dry summers, which I definitely am. Ooh, somebody has a track system. Yeah, I've looked at those paddock paradise designs. I think those are really interesting. For my horse management, I have tried to be strategic about where I've put the sacrifice area so that it's also creating a fire break between where the trees and my house are. So it's like an area I don't really want to have a bunch of, like, I'm fine with it being pretty much a dirt lot because that is better for defensibility. Also, my ranch burned 2 years ago, so I'm super freaked out about everything now. But yeah, and then I think I agree spot on. Like the time and timing is still, you know, the principles still apply no matter what scale you're operating at. And if you don't have the forage to graze like through that whole recovery period before you come back on a paddock, then I think, yeah, like dry lotting and doing some supplemental feed is the strategy I would recommend as well.
I'm glad somebody brought up track systems. I don't actually have any experience with those, but I have seen them talked about in the context of horse grazing management a lot lately.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting design, and would love to hear more from folks that are experienced in that. Well, I want to open it up to audience questions in a second, but I'm curious if y'all have any questions for each other that you want to ask.
Yeah, I've got one. But you can go first, Meg, if you like.
Before I forget mine, because I have only raised horses in the dormant season so far. So I'm wondering what the differences are that the different management changes that you make between dormant and growing forage with yours.
Well,
How do
they
you
certainly
things
get a
different?
lot. They get a lot fatter in the growing season. So we're in our dormant season at the moment, and you probably just they don't do as well because obviously, I mean, we also get very lignified grass where we are too. So it's stalky and they don't do as well, and they don't always eat the same clovers and medics that cattle and sheep like to eat. So there's often good feed going in the autumn, winter, spring that they just don't eat. I think in my growing season, we grow a lot more green biomass, and you probably just you can move them faster and you can come back faster. So you're actually pumping that system. You've got all that liquid carbon pathway down in the roots, getting stimulated more. Really, you're just able to do that faster. You don't have to give them as long a recovery time. And they certainly do a lot better on the more digestible grass as well.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, that's probably the biggest difference. And you're not as worried about whether you're going to have. So I graze them on 240 on about 1,800 acres. But when I get to my next rotation and there's not enough grass, then I have the opportunity to send them down through another 600 or 700 acres. And I've only had that opportunity in the last 5 years when I've bought my parents' land, and it just gives recovery time for the rest of the place. But yeah, so that's probably my answer. My question for you, Meg, was: do you think that the horse, being a non-ruminant, can be as effective in regenerative? It can have as big a regenerative influence on a landscape, or do you think we still need to have ruminants going through the landscape as well?
And I think that having a diversity of species is always going to be superior to just having one species long term. But horses, because they are non-ruminants, I think that they are going to send a lot more nutrients out the back end compared to what they keep in their bodies. Because ruminants are pretty good at digesting stuff, and horses are going to pass a lot more of that through, and they are going to, like I said, have different microbes. So I think that bringing that diversity of microbes is really important. But in terms of trying to process and beat down and recycle old dead forage, old oxidized grass, cattle, I think, are definitely going to be the ones you want to use for that job. But if you want a high gross margin way to turn decent quality forage into money, like horses are largely an overlooked enterprise choice, especially in the US. So there's a lot of stock contractors, rodeo producers out there that have young stock and have breeding herds, stuff that doesn't actually get taken to rodeos, but just has to stand around and eat for years and years and years. And it can take a lot of land and a lot of feed to maintain those animals. So it can be a really great way to help those guys out while also feeding them a lot cheaper than those guys could.
Yeah.
So interesting. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Meg.
I think the next step for me is going to be, now that I'm actually going to be closing on some of my own land, I am going to try planting some winter forages, cool season forages into my dormant warm season stuff this fall and over the winter and into spring. So I'm trying to take the step of having something green and growing all year long. And then I think it's going to be a lot easier to maintain a higher needs class of livestock through the winter without so much supplement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would encourage that. We plant cover crops, multi-species cover crops, just with disc planters into our dormant grass, and with an oats as the base, but with lots of other things as well. And it really makes a big difference. So yeah, and then in the summer I'll plant summer cover crops into my grass as well. So just always trying to add life and different root systems for more diverse microbes. So it's an exciting way to do ag as well.
Yeah, Gavin, you share a continent with a guy named Colin Seiss down there, and I am a huge fangirl of Colin Seiss. So I'm really
yeah,
excited to implement his pasture cropping strategies.
yeah. I've seen Kyle a lot. It's good stuff. It just makes sense.
All right.
Another important thing I want to bring up before we close here is that horses have some more dietary specifics than cattle do and other forms of livestock. There's a lot of stuff that they can't eat. So you got to make sure to pay attention to that. For example, rumensin, ionophores, some growth promotants that are commonly put in cattle feed in my part of the world can kill horses. Then we have things like wheat and oats that have awns on the end of the seed heads, and those awns can get stuck in a horse's mouth and cause problems. There's blister beetles that can cause problems. So there's more stuff to pay attention to with horses.
Yeah, appreciate that. All right, I see Kent has his hand raised. Also, if y'all want to, if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat. If we don't have time to get to them, we'll try and get them answered and send them in the follow-up. But Kent, go ahead and ask your question.
Well, actually, it's more of an invite, in a sense, because of what we're going to be doing here in the Owens Valley. There's a large number of area that's grazed during the wintertime, especially by horses and mules. A lot of equines, some of these pack outfits have upwards of 100 head. And so this is going to be a first of its kind relative to what Rancher to Rancher is doing relative to equine stuff. And our day is going to be tentatively, it looks like October 17th. And I'm just saying I want to invite people, if you have the opportunity, to come and visit. It will be a classic Rancher to Rancher day. Everything's out in the field. We primarily will have some of our team members here to do our Rancher to Rancher day. And like I said, it'll be a first of its kind with regards to taking a look at land where horses and mules are used to manage the area or are simply wintered in this particular area. And so I think it's going to be fun. This is a free event. Food will be served. And if all goes well, I'm going to have one of my friends who's an incredible backcountry cook. So you'll have a packing experience. You just don't get to go into the wilderness this time. So at any rate, I'm extending that invitation from the standpoint of just, this is going to be unique. This is going to be an exciting thing. I will have more information as it comes along relative to what's going to happen and where it's going to be. But yeah, I've been studying horses on landscapes for quite some time, just from an ecological perspective as a wildlife biologist. But also, there's just a lot of stuff and information out there relative to wild horses in North America and their relationship to the land, and also some of the management that I'm familiar with now that's going on, for example, in Theodore Roosevelt National Park with wild horses and gathering wild horses. And it's being done by someone who's a holistic practitioner, Whit Hibbard. And so, at any rate, yeah, invitation. If you can, come down, visit. There'll be food. We'll figure out a place for you to stay. If you're coming from a long ways away, and there's plenty of camping spots and various sundry things. So, and yeah, I'm excited about this, and I'm excited about the fact that you guys happen to have this webinar in combination with something that I've actually been trying to get going for about 10 years now. And it's exciting to finally have that. This will be the Natural Resources Conservation Service, along with the Eastern Sierra Land Trust and Rancher to Rancher. So anyway, just and I will have more information as I go. But yeah, it's an invite. Come hang out. Hang out with mules. You can have coffee with mules.
It's a heck of a pitch, Kent.
Is this the thing where you would want us to bring our own horse flesh to ride around on, or is it non-foot kind of thing?
We're going to be out in pastures. We spend a day out there. We look at soil health in relationship to the ecosystem processes that are talked about in holistic management. Rancher to Rancher has been around for 13 years. We're primarily funded by private foundations. Our most recent grant was from Sally Calhoun and the No Regrets Foundation for 2 years, and we have $111,000 to do Rancher to Rancher stuff. We work primarily in California with resource conservation districts. And then I recently founded, moved forward into the Southwest, and I'm working with the Southwest Grass-Fed Livestock Alliance and have formed a team of rancher-to-rancher people based somewhat in New Mexico, but it will encompass Colorado and Arizona as well. And hope to see you guys at Regenerate, because we're all going to be there. Bunch of old white farts kind of thing. So, anyway,
perennial slacker Kent Reeves. All right, thanks for the pitch. Thanks for the pitch. Thank you.
And then there's my buddy here. So there.
Bye. Thank you both so much for your time today. This was a fascinating conversation. And it sounds like there's a lot of other interesting stuff happening in the ecosystem around this. So I'm excited to stay tuned in. It looks like it's time to go hug my dog. Katie, you got anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, just thanks so much to everyone for who joined us live, and all the great conversations and our amazing speakers. Thank you guys so much. And there will be a follow-up email with the recording. I will also post it to the YouTube before the end of the week to make it easy for folks to share. And maybe just a quick, Meg and Gavin, if folks want to get a hold of you on any follow-up, how do you want folks to get in touch with you?
Well, you can hit me on Facebook, Meg Greski, or you can email me, mgcows@gmail.com.
And I'm Gavin Haywood on Facebook, or gavin@serumaustralis.com.au for email. Happy to answer any questions or be given any information.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, sure appreciate your generosity of time here today. And yeah, thanks all. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you.
And I
Thanks
certainly
for-
hope to see you at your event, Kent, in October.